Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
Good evening once again on this day, 1194 of the Trump administration. 190 days to go now until the presidential election. And perhaps you're old enough to remember when this president swore off the daily format of coronavirus press conferences, saying they were no longer worth his time, mostly because of the global reaction after he said this.
Supposing we hit the body with a tremendous, whether it's ultraviolet or just very powerful light, and I think you said that has him in check, but you're going to test it. And then I said, supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way. And I think you said you're going to test that too. Sounds interesting. Right, and then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number in the lungs. So it'd be interesting to check that. So that you're going to have to use medical doctors with. But it sounds interesting to me.
So that was Thursday. The president swore off the daily briefings for an entire weekend after the idea of injectable disinfectants failed to catch on. Tonight, in what veteran White House aide David Gergen called a form of addiction, the president was back at it, this time in the Rose Garden. Today, with 56,000 dead and 26 million unemployed, the president faced the news media again. He said things are moving along and there's a tremendous energy in this country right now. He also said he couldn't imagine why people would ingest disinfectants. Today, a parade of CEOs came before the microphone, most of whom have learned the name of the game by now and thanked the president for his leadership. He's going deep on blaming China, saying today, quote, "We are not happy with China." He said one country is accountable for what happened, and it could have been stopped, and those who have died have, quote, "sacrificed for incompetence." He again mentioned, quote, "I built the greatest economy in the history of the world." He again mentioned shutting down, quote, "causes death also." And he again mentioned the 1917 flu pandemic, which is what he calls the 1918 flu pandemic, and issued his daily reminder of the death toll estimate had he done nothing. He said, quote, "We've lost a lot of people," while noting U.S. deaths may be headed now for 70,000. Tonight, we widen back out to the real world and find a U.S. death toll that has passed 56,000, with not yet 2% of our population tested. We know of nearly 1 million confirmed cases of this coronavirus. That's against the backdrop of more than 3 million cases worldwide. Tonight, the Washington Post is reporting Trump's intelligence briefing book cited the virus threat on multiple occasions as far back as January and February. One of the reporters on the story spoke to our colleague Chris Hayes earlier this evening.
References to the coronavirus were included in at least a dozen of the president's daily briefs. They were calling attention to the threat of the coronavirus in a way that amounts to a fairly steady drumbeat. throughout January and February. He doesn't read the PDB, unlike his predecessors. He relies almost exclusively on an oral briefing that he has curtailed to roughly 2 or 3 times a week. Across this stretch of time, of course, he is, in January and February, the period of time we're writing about, he is very dismissive of the threat of this virus.
You may recall it was about a month ago that Donald Trump said this.
Could have ever seen something like this coming, but now we know, and we know it can happen and happen again, and if it does, somebody's going to be very well prepared because of what we've learned and how we've done.
As we mentioned, the president appeared in the Rose Garden today to announce a new plan to increase resources for testing, yet the upshot of all of it was that testing is still going to be the job of the states. The White House says it will be coordinating with governors to support testing plans. Today, the administration was asked about its previous statements vowing to boost testing.
In early March, you said we'd be at 4 million tests by the following week. We're just now got there in the last few days. So what have you learned about what went wrong, a month and a half or over the last month and a half or 2 months, and what's going to go right now?
John, I appreciate the question, but it represents a misunderstanding on your part and frankly, a lot of people in the public's part about the difference between having a test versus the ability to actually process the test.
So when you said 4 million tests 7 weeks ago, you were just talking about tests being sent out, not actually being completed? I'm a little confused.
John, I think precisely correct. Those were tests that, frankly, but for the president's leadership, we'd still be waiting on those tests to be done in many cases.
I think it's very important to know, and this you can get from any other country, I think, if they're being honest, not only do we have the most testing in the world by far, but we have by far the best testing.
Except for percentage of the population. Meanwhile, more states and cities are moving ahead with plans to start reopening their economies and lifting those stay-at-home restrictions. After weeks of shutdown, about 10 states have partially reopened. Texas, which, let's not forget, is home to 29 million Americans, will lift its stay-at-home order on Thursday of this week. Some businesses will be allowed to open back up Friday. Miami-Dade County down in Florida will reopen parks, boating facilities, waterways, golf courses starting Wednesday. Illinois now facing a court challenge to its order to extend the restrictions. A judge has ruled against the governor there, Governor Pritzker, issuing a restraining order over the extension of the state's stay-at-home order through May 30. Pritzker says he'll fight to keep his order in place. A number of school systems remain closed. This afternoon, the president sure seemed to urge governors to consider reopening schools for the remainder of the year.
I know that there are some governors that aren't necessarily ready to open up their states, but they may be ready to open up their school systems. We'll see, but that's their choice. But the word is safety, okay? Rapid, but safety.
It is Tuesday, the 28th of April of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. You know, just a small pinch, a mere scant dash of hot smoked Hungarian paprika makes all the difference in the world. Oh, indeed. I really do prefer the smoked kind. Just the regular hot paprika. It's wonderful in and of itself, but really, try the smoked kind. If it happens to be the Spanish paprika, it is equally as good. And don't put the Hungarian paprika on a lesser shelf than the Spanish. The Spanish is as good, not greater. Let's be clear about that. But the thing is, there's a lot less of the Spanish paprika, and that's why it's a bit more expensive. Rarity drives cost. Oh, boy, does it. Have you ever tried to get a roll of toilet paper or two from the corner toilet roll pusher? Yeah, they're around. They are. This is the world we live in, folks, and they want to open it up because they, with a capital T, do not want to pay out unemployment benefits. How dare they? How dare they? Well, looks like there's a lot of backtracking, recriminations, and Trump couldn't last, 1/67th of a Scaramucci before he had to go back and get his ego fix? He's an addict. Yeah, pupils the size of saucers? Pie tins? I'm trying to remember the exact quote. But yeah, somebody should be looking into that. I don't think you're going to find out from Walter Reed. No. I wonder if Trump thinks that Walter Reed is still alive. You might think that he does. One thing that the Vietnam War and this COVID-19 crisis, this pandemic, have in common with all the people dead, 56,000 or so dead, U.S. dead in Vietnam, and we're now approaching 60,000 dead here in the United States. Well, the one thing that both the Vietnam War and the pandemic have in common is that Donald Trump didn't fight in either one of them. Nope, gave up. Bone spurs was the reason he couldn't take part in Vietnam. And it looks like those bone spurs have now calcified his brain because he's a bonehead during the pandemic. And that's actually being quite respectful. Indeed. Well, looks like the payday lenders are going to get a little bit of a break. They're going to get some stimulus money. Stimulus money. Because they're doing so poorly now, because people aren't going in for these mafia loans that you have to pay exorbitant usury prices over interest. Usury interest. Did you know? I got to tell you, I'm old enough to remember, and the reason I remember this is because I had a paper route when I was in elementary school, a bicycle paper route. They allowed us to do that back then. And I had quite a large route, but regardless, I remember reading in the newspaper then about how it was illegal to charge more than 6% and oftentimes 3% in some states and localities, that much interest on a loan. Anything that was approaching 11 to 13%, that was criminal. That was under what was known as usury laws. Now I know my audience all are pretty much old enough to remember this, but I'm just making a dramatic flourish here, just to give a linear quality a bit to the story. Anyway, it used to be that, anything that was, 8 to 11%, you never went there because it was obviously the mob. And now we're routinely seeing 30, 34, 36%. To get a loan. Well, payday lenders have sometimes 8,000%. Even the mob wouldn't have charged that much, but they didn't have right-wing government backing now, did they? Now they do. So, the payday lenders need some government help because they're not making that 8,000% interest on these mob loans that they give out to poor people. And, do you think Bill Barr will look into that? Yeah, he'll look into who's trying to stop it from happening. Because apparently some do-gooder social justice warrior is getting in the way of the mob making some money off the backs of poor people, and that is unconstitutional. Okay? A mob business is not just a business, it's a person. Why do you think corporations are people too, my friend? Hey, whatever happened to that guy? That's Romney who said, yeah, corporations are people too, my friend. Whatever happened to him? Well, he may be laying low. He could be coming back. You never know. Well, maybe we should just go ahead and dive in and let you know what's happening on the rest of the menu, because at the top, of course, that was Trump taking no responsibility, and he just can't imagine why anyone would ingest disinfectants. Is he really that droll? Does he really think the American people, and when I say the American people, I don't mean the toxic third who are going to drink Lysol, and already have in many cases, by the way. I got to interject. There's some maggots here in Southern Oregon who insist that no Trump loyalist ever drank Lysol because they watched the news conference and he never said take it. Like, are you kidding me? I watched that whole press conference, and I got to tell you, I couldn't watch press conferences after that. I should confess, actually. I have lessened my viewing of Trump's campaign propaganda COVID pressers, okay? But I watched that one. Did he tell people to go out and ingest Lysol or even inject? I think he was trying to say, spray your lungs with Lysol, drink Clorox, and is there any way we can get UV rays inside the body? And I'm thinking, wow, up to the use of the UV rays, he wants to embalm people. He really? Well, I think they used to put formaldehyde in you too. So, but the disinfectants, the Lysol and the bleach, yeah, definitely embalming type fluids. But the UV light, that's something. That's from outer space. That's Space Force stuff, indeed. So people went out and said, well, Trump's asking about it. Let's try it. We'll be like his guinea pigs. I don't think they thought of it that way. They believe that the President of the United States, who happens to be their dear leader, wants them to, and many did, and they suffer the consequences. And, these are vastly reported. County intakes from emergency rooms are all logged. I mean, come on. So, but it's curious how some people will just latch on. And this is Facebook, I should mention, too, where it is rife with right-wing propaganda. We don't have to mention how it's generated, by the FSB, okay? Russia, the Kremlin. We don't even have to mention that part of it because many of it is homegrown. And I don't know if it's just to sow discord. No, not just to sow discord, but there's a few other motives behind it too, but it's all it's terrible. It's un-American. People drank poison because the President of the United States said it might be a good idea and he wants his experts to look into it because he knows more than the experts. And I will say these pandemic denying anti-vax maggots claim they know more than you, and you will never forget it. They won't let you. So what we need to do is drive the vermin back into the nether regions where they belong, where they're afraid once again to lift their heads because, it will get lopped off because dimwits are dimwits. Now they're emboldened. They think they know more than the scientists because they have a feeling it's constitutional, it's liberty. And Bill Barr, this Christianist, his motivations are clear too. He wants power, and Trump is his way. He really is. And people who know Bill Barr have actually been speaking of that. So, all right. Well, is Kim Jong-un dead? Sincerely dead? Not just merely dead, but sincerely dead? Well, I guess the judgment on that is still out. Who knows? We might find that he actually is in that resort where his train is. Okay. So I just want to know when the last love letter between Trump and Kim were, and that might give us an indication about Kim's condition. And his sister is not going to take over North Korea, let's be clear, okay? Yeah, a lot of people think, oh, yeah, she's the obvious, but that's not taking into consideration the chauvinistic. Is that a mild enough term? Hey, it's male dominated, and they're never going to let a woman lead. Women follow. A few steps behind in many cases. Literally. It's mandated by cultural norms, and if not that, well, they got somebody with a big stick to beat the crap out of you, and sometimes that stick turns into, cannon fire. That's how they punish you. I know that sounds very propagandistic, too, and it is. But, hey, it's all comic book time now, except people are dying. 60,000 people dead in a few months. And we people who are sheltering in place are being accused of being scaredy cats. Those death rates are so low. Yeah, they're all right about talking about percentages, except when you think about the percentages of how many people have died and how quickly it's pretty large, especially when we have no herd immunity that has not been proven to exist with this virus. If you're going to get a virus from outer space, it's not going to teach you language. Laurie Anderson was partly correct, but still, when you get this kind of a virus from outer space that mutates and evolves, I think that's going to be smart enough to, walk around the herd and pick off some of the outsiders. Then you make your way into that herd, and next thing you know, they're all dead. And everyone wonders how it was that these disemboweled cattle in a circle, a crop circle in the middle of the crops, how they just came to be, and now we know. Caravans of illegal aliens from outer space. All right. So we got that going for us, which is nice. All right. What's on the rest of the menu? In the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, McConnell vowed in the next round of coronavirus relief he would make it impossible for workers to sue their employers if they contract the virus when forced back on the job. They're not only trying to steal the unemployment they were promised, but they're going to make it so you have, no more workers' rights. You want a job now? You're a slave in some fashion, or, I don't know, indentured servant. We'll call them indentured servants. A purloined GOP memo tells senators to blame Trump's virus failures on political correctness, social justice warriors, identity politics, and China. And Bill Barr ordered federal prosecutors across the U.S. to identify and prosecute any unconstitutional coronavirus-related restrictions from state and local governments, then steal any of their medical supplies that they can find, because they're pirates. They're all pirates. After the break, we move to the chef's table where Trump faces a tough UN battle if he pushes his plans to extend an Iranian arms embargo. Yeah, at least there's some cooler heads out there in the world. Some. And Brazil's top court authorized an investigation of Bolsonaro on charges he interfered in the work of the country's federal police force for political motives. Wow. Mini Trump in Brazil doing what Major Trump does here? All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. If you thought the beginning rant was a bit disjointed, you would be correct. So why don't we inject some curated order here on the rest of the show. Only ingest, though. All right. Let's be clear. Let's see. If you would go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link, at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will hopefully find our Patreon link. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and I should say, there have been folks who have been recurring Patreons to Netroots Radio for a considerable time, since we've been broadcasting nonstop for almost 10 years now. We're going on 10 years of continuous 24/7, 365 resistance broadcast radio because of your generosity, and we thank those who have done that. And there have been several who have upped their recurring donation during the pandemic. Boy, my belief in the inherent goodness of mankind is once again assuaged. Yes, thank you. If any new people out there would like to help our effort, you can do so by clicking on that link. And if you could afford the cost of an espresso-type coffee drink, and I know it's tough, don't do it if you can't. But if you can, we know how to stretch those dollars because of our almost 10-year experience of stretching dollars on the quantum level, by the way. Oh, yeah, there's some crazy quarks down there. And we've learned a few tricks. And your efforts in helping us continue our civic duty has allowed us to pay the bills so we can fly under the radar, just under the radar. And we've been continuing to do this resistance radio because of your generosity, and we thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and we thank Tom. I, of course, take care of at Justice Putnam, and I'm not going to thank myself because I'm not that kind of a guy. You know, please. And I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime and get that linked up on social media. And if you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West. And pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes. And wherever podcasts can be found, we're there, down in the W's. Okay, let's get into this first offering in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, because we are a salon. And there is a chef's table, very exclusive. Oh, yeah, sure. But everybody's invited, and we'll get there right away, even though the opening rant was quite long. Wow. All right, Emily Singer of the American Independent brings us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Senate Majority Leader, I like to call him Moscow Mitch von Hindenburg McConnell, because von Hindenburg was, let's be clear, the gravedigger of democracy in Germany back in the day. Well, he signaled his support this week for a Trump administration proposal to add a provision to the next round of coronavirus relief that would make it impossible for workers to sue their employers if they contract the virus on the job. This is the guy that got sued over an OSHA complaint because he had a bunch of illegal alien Polish workers with no hard hats building his high-rise in New York. And some union guy said, "What the hell?" And whatever happened to that? Yeah. Trump's paid a lot of fines for breaking the law. Isn't it weird? And apparently the toxic third of America thinks that's the way they want their president to be. In a statement announcing the Senate will return to Washington, D.C. on May 4th, the Kentucky Republican, I like to call him Moscow Mitch von Hindenburg McConnell, called the proposal an urgent need to shield businesses from lawsuits, painting it as something that benefits essential workers, even though those workers would be the ones prohibited from suing their employer if they became infected. Look, they're just lucky to have a job. You don't bite the hand that feeds you, especially while you're being poisoned by forces beyond anyone's control. If you're worried about your products being gouged on prices, jacking up the price, imagine what they're going to do to worker wages now. Oh, you can't make that much. Well, While our nation is asking everyone, from frontline healthcare professionals to essential small business owners to major employers, to adapt in new ways and keep serving a massive tangle of federal and state laws, could easily mean their heroic efforts are met with years of endless lawsuits. We cannot let that happen, Moscow Mitch von Hindenburg McConnell said. Donald Trump himself pushed for so-called liability waivers at an April 20th briefing. We tried to take liability away from these companies. We just don't want that because we want the companies to open and to open strong, Trump said in a response to questions about whether companies would be liable if they reopened and their workers started to become sick. Even if the Senate approved such waivers, it's unlikely the House would go along with legislation rolling back workers' rights. Still, protecting businesses from lawsuits, also known as tort reform, has been a conservative goal for years. Republican-leaning business groups like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which in 2018 spent $0 for Democratic candidates, but spent $6 million supporting GOP candidates. They have traditionally backed laws making it harder for companies to get sued. While McConnell signaled that the next phase of coronavirus relief would include a long-sought protection for businesses, he also attacked Democrats for demanding what he called liberal policy goals in the next round of relief. The Senate must focus on concrete steps to strengthen our response to these crises. The American people do not need tangential left-wing daydreams. They need common-sense steps that move us toward the response, recovery, and future readiness that Americans need, McConnell wrote. Yeah, I don't know how you get a really bad Southern accent in a written document, but we do that here. Now, the daydreams McConnell is referring to include hazard pay for essential workers who are risking their lives by going to work each day at places like hospitals and grocery stores. Now, Republicans have claimed it is unfair that other states should have to bail out places like New York, which has been hit hard by coronavirus. And McConnell specifically argued that states like New York should go bankrupt instead. But Governor Andrew Cuomo quickly rebuked those arguments, noting that states like his New York, in fact, contribute more and receive less money back each year than states his Republican opponents hail from. If you want to do an analysis of who is a giver and who is a taker, who are the number one giver? The number one giver, nobody puts more money into the pot than the state of New York, Cuomo said in a press conference. We are the number one donor state. And if you look at who happen to be the donor states, who are the giver states, they are the same states that are talking about now. Then he added, who are the taker states? Kentucky, southeast part of the country. Desai Martin, also of the American Independent, brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A memo written by a Republican campaign consultant and distributed by the Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee, distributed somehow to the press. I wonder how that happened. Advises Republican senators not to defend Trump's slow and inept response to the coronavirus crisis. The 57-page memo, written by strategists at O'Donnell and Associates, urges instead to blame Democrats, China, in the World Health Organization for the spread of the pandemic. Note, don't defend Trump other than the China travel ban. Attack China. An April 17 memo states twice. Now, tens of thousands of people have traveled from China to the U.S. since Trump instituted travel restrictions from the country in early February in what he has touted as a significant move against the spread of the virus. Yeah. In a section titled, Political Correctness Made This Crisis Worse, the memo advises Republicans to blame Democratic politicians in New York and New Jersey for making the crisis worse because they were worried about, quote, social justice and identity politics, end quote. It criticizes them for being worried about losing progressive points and focusing too much on how policies would impact low-income families and communities, you know, black and brown people. And Santa Monica Goebbels, Stephen Miller, don't like black and brown people, now do he? In addition to telling GOP campaigns to blame Democrats, the memo repeatedly urges them to attack China, where the new virus was first detected, and provides advice for defending against accusations that their comments about the new coronavirus are racist. The memo states, President Trump is right to call this the Chinese virus, because Trump has used the term many times, really now. In addition to blaming China for the spread of the virus, it also claims, quote, the World Health Organization aided and abetted the Chinese hit and run and advanced their cover-up of the facts. They acted as the handmaiden of the Chinese Communist Party. China campaigned for Tedros, the current director, and he owed them a favor. This is exactly how mobsters think, you know? National and international experts in health have warned against using terms like Chinese virus, or Wuhan virus. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said stigma and discrimination can occur when people associate a disease, such as COVID-19, with a population or nationality, even though not everyone in that population or from that region is specifically at risk for the disease. Now, Trump's response to the crisis, including lies about coronavirus, is regularly criticized by medical professionals and other experts for weeks. Trump touted the use of hydroxychloroquine, an anti-malarial drug, as a cure for COVID-19. However, a study of the drug at the VA found that patients who received the drug had higher death rates than those who did not receive it. Oh, a small study on human beings, veterans, you know, our national heroes who just didn't die for their country the first time. Now they can. Balsamo of the AP brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And before I start, I need to state, John Mitchell, Bill Barr, now more than ever. Attorney General William Barr ordered federal prosecutors across the U.S. to identify coronavirus-related restrictions from state and local governments, quote, that could be violating the constitutional rights and civil liberties of individual citizens, end quote. The memo to U.S. attorneys directs the head of the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division and the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan to coordinate the department's efforts to monitor state and local policies and take action if needed. Oh, investigate the investigators again now, eh? If state or local ordinance crosses a line from an appropriate exercise of authority to stop the spread of COVID-19 into an overbearing infringement of constitutional and statutory protections, the Department of Justice may have an obligation to address the overreach in federal court, Barr wrote. Barr's memo comes about 2 weeks after the Justice Department filed a statement of interest in a civil case in Mississippi, siding with a Christian church, where local officials tried to stop Holy Week services broadcast to congregants sitting in their cars in a parking lot. The directive also comes as many stay-at-home orders are set to expire and governors eager to rescue their economies are moving to ease restrictions meant to control the spread of the coronavirus, even as new hotspots emerge. And experts warn that moving too fast could prove disastrous. Well, that means nothing when the economy is involved. And Bill Barr obviously wants due process and equal protection for the markets against all of us, because we are the true enemy of the people. We, the people. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
For an expectant mother, taking care of her developing baby means taking good care of herself. One way she can do this is by ensuring she gets vaccinated. If a woman is or might be pregnant during flu season, it's especially important to get her annual flu shot, preferably before the end of October. In addition, women should be vaccinated against whooping cough during the 3rd trimester of each pregnancy. Failure to get vaccinated places both mother and baby at increased risk for serious complications of these infections, including hospitalization and even death. If you're pregnant or planning to get pregnant, ask your healthcare provider when you should get your vaccines. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1965. That was the day the American Federation of Hosiery Workers merged with the Textile Workers Union of America. Hosiery workers had begun organizing as early as 1909. By 1923, the American Federation of Full Fashion Hosiery Workers, as the union was originally called, had affiliated with the American Federation of Labor. Women made up the majority of those employed in the industry. Competition within the industry was fierce and a major focus for the early union. From its founding, the union was known for its progressive stances. It focused not only on contracts, but also on social welfare programs such as pensions and health insurance. During the Great Depression in 1933, the union pushed for the founding of a low-rent housing project in Philadelphia. The result was the Carl Mackley Houses, a subsidized governmental housing project. The union operated a nursery school for residents of Carl Mackley and the surrounding community. When the Congress of Industrial Organizations broke off from the AFL, the hosiery union left with them as part of the Textile Workers Organizing Committee. In the spring of 1937, Pennsylvania hosiery workers held a sit-down strike. The strike was led by Emil Raiv, a Polish-American worker who had joined the union when he was only 15 years old. The strike grew to include 50,000 workers and shut down the Pennsylvania hosiery industry. The workers won raises between 8 and 10%. In 1947, the hosiery workers decided that they did not want to pay the dues increase required by the CIO. They left the organization and re-affiliated with the AFL. Finally, in 1965, changes in the industry led the union to merge with the Textile Workers Union. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labor.
This is a Radio Labor report recorded on Tuesday, April 28th, 2020. I'm Mark Boulanger. April 28th is the International Day for Health and Safety. It's a day particularly important this year because so many workers are dying as they do their jobs to help people during the pandemic. The International Trade Union Confederation, the ITUC, wants governments to declare COVID-19 an occupational disease so that workers can have access to existing health and safety laws and programs. Sharon Burrow is the ITUC's General Secretary.
Today, we mourn the loss of life for workers all around the world who've lost their lives at work. There is no reason a worker should go to work and not go home at night safely. We know the grief that families feel. We know that trade unions feel both a grief and an anger that occupational health and safety measures were not in place to save those lives. We also acknowledge that there are too many work-related injuries. And of course, diseases that can cause both injury and death are often unknown until much later, when a worker will lose their lives or become indeed unable to work. So today we remember those who are in fact no longer with us, but we renew our determination to fight for health and safety. And in the context of COVID-19, that has never been a more stark reminder to us that in fact we must act. We want occupational health and safety, all the laws that are in place and more. We want it to become a fundamental right. We also want to recognise today that in fact we have workers who are putting their lives on the line for us to keep us safe. They are, of course, health workers. They are those workers who are in other forms of care in the community, aged care, child care, community care, those working in our schools. There are transport workers. There are council service workers picking up our rubbish and providing us with other essential services. There are cleaners, of course, who are keeping our buildings sanitised. And indeed, there are those shop assistants, the workers that we see in supermarkets, in pharmacies, in many other businesses. We say to you, we will fight not just for your safety with protective equipment immediately, but we will also fight to see that this virus is recognised as a workplace virus so that you can be covered appropriately by occupational health and safety compensation. COVID-19 is a workplace-related disease. We know it affects others in the community, but if you're at work and you contract this disease, then of course you should be compensated. We will fight for paid sick leave, for wage guarantees, for income support for those workers who are not in standard forms of work. We know that people in platform business, freelancers, the self-employed, those bogus independent contractors, and of course the massive numbers of our brothers and sisters in the informal economy need our support to survive at this time. It raises the question, one, occupational health and safety as a fundamental right, and then, of course, the absolute struggle to get work and the labour market regulated so we never again see workers without appropriate rights. April 28th. It's a sad day, but it's a day that we actually pledge to fight for the living. I bring you not just solidarity from workers all around the world, but I bring you the support and the commitment of the ITUC, along with all the global union federations, all the trade unions in our family. We will fight for the living just as we mourn for the dead. Solidarity.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about caring for each other through global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Oh my. Going to be a tad warmer today than yesterday. We topped out about 77 here at the mothership in Rogue River. Oh yeah. Now we are slated for a high of 83, which means we could be 85. Partly cloudy most of the day. Winds will be light and variable. Partly to mostly cloudy tonight with lows in the mid to upper 50s, and the winds will pick up out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, a little scouring wind, as we like to say. Tomorrow should be cloudy skies early and will become partly cloudy in the day. Only a high of 77, oh darn, with winds out of the west at 10 to 15 miles per hour. Oh, it's going to scour even more now, won't it? Coronavirus infections in Jackson County here in southern Oregon stands at 49 with none dead, thankfully. And that's because we instituted stay-in-place orders. Let's hope there's not a spike, because people are now beginning to, violate the suggestion. Indeed. Well, locally, grass pollen is rated low. I hope so. I don't want to sneeze. The regional air quality index is in the good range at 19 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is very high. Well, not very high. It's only high at 7. But that's pretty damn high. Put on some sun protection now. SP 800,000, whatever it is. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.21 inches. Can't rise much more. Visibility is at 8 miles. And relative humidity is 88%. Wow, it's rather humid out there. Almost tropical, like Hawaii. Alrighty, well, weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchase. And these people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 47 degrees with rain and coronavirus. And a very chagrined prime minister who says they better slow down on opening their economy, because that guy had it pretty bad and he almost died and he knows. So there. Paris is 65 and mostly cloudy with rioting in the Parisian suburbs because people are tired of being put in their flats. Rome is 69 and partly cloudy with another spike of coronavirus. Kyiv is 67 and fair with coronavirus. Kabul is 63 with showers in the vicinity and, of course, coronavirus. Hong Kong is 70 degrees and clear, but they've got coronavirus even though they think they don't. Tokyo is 54 and partly cloudy with a pretty bad case of coronavirus across the country. Sydney, Australia is 65 and mostly cloudy, and I don't like that Prime Minister, and he's getting lauded for, well, attacking coronavirus. San Francisco, California is 55 degrees and sunny and still understand place orders because of coronavirus. And New York is 52 degrees Fahrenheit, sunny with coronavirus. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Umaira Pamuk, Michelle Nichols, and Arshad Mohammed bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and they are all out of Reuters. The U.S. faces a tough, messy battle if it uses a threat to trigger a return of all UN sanctions on Iran as leverage to get the 15-member Security Council to extend and strengthen an arms embargo on Tehran. Washington has shared its strategy, confirmed by a U.S. official speaking on condition of anonymity with Britain, France, and Germany, who are council members and parties to the 2015 deal between Iran and world powers that prevents Tehran from developing nuclear weapons in exchange for sanctions relief. Under that deal, a UN arms embargo is due to expire in October. A U.S. drafted resolution to extend the embargo has been given to Britain, France, and Germany, but UN diplomats said it has not been shared with the remaining 11 council members, including Russia and China. It will be dead on arrival, predicted a Security Council diplomat. Now, of course, we know a resolution needs 9 votes in favor and no vetoes by Russia, China, the United States, Britain, or France to be adopted. Diplomats said the U.S. would likely struggle to get Russia and China to allow an arms embargo extension. Do you think?
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A Supreme Court judge authorized an investigation of allegations that Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro tried to interfere in the work of the country's federal police force for political motives, the top court said. Justice Celso de Mello gave the federal police 60 days to carry out the investigation requested by Brazil's chief public prosecutor Augusto Aras, following the accusations made by former Justice Minister Sergio Moro, who resigned on Friday. Bolsonaro called the accusations unfounded, but they have set off the worst political crisis since he took office in January last year and has lost the far-right leader valuable allies. The investigation comes at a bad moment for Bolsonaro, who is facing criticism for downplaying the gravity of the coronavirus epidemic that has killed over 4,500 people in the country and virtually paralyzed Latin America's largest economy. And that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.